Good? All right, guys. So I did my thesis on humanistic communication, an alignment of effective questions and statements with the hierarchy of needs. Okay? So when it comes to the hierarchy of needs, as all of us, we work briefly or mostly in the psychology. Can anybody tell me what the hierarchy of needs is?
Like biological needs.
Okay. Go ahead, Calvin. I know you can go answer about it.
Like what the biological needs are?
No, what exactly is the hierarchy of needs?
The hierarchy needs are just everything that a human needs in order to feel like, I don't know, I guess fulfilled or...
Fulfilled, satisfied, safe, etc. Okay? So, my feeling, okay, and which is my problem statement within my thesis, is that I felt like that there's a lack of communication within the classroom. I feel like that we have kids that come from different neighborhoods, kids that come from different cultural backgrounds, and that their teachers or their educators do not understand the needs that are not being met for them in the classroom. And I feel like a lot of that is lost because teachers are not establishing appropriate rapport and communication with them within the classroom. The purpose or research hypothesis that I have is that if we use Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a communication tool, okay, we should be able to easily target the reason for problematic behaviors and increase an educator's rapport in the classroom. Okay? Now, when it comes to Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs was used for long-term development within an individual. What I would like to do and I'd like to propose is that we use Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a day-to-day basis, kind of like how we do dailies, right? Instead, we structure them around Abraham Maslow's theory of individual growth. Okay? By doing that, I have to ask some research questions about what has already been done in the past. When it comes to positive and humanistic psychology, what has been the transformation between the two when it comes to bringing positive psychology within the classroom? But at the same time, though, what kind of influence has Maslow had when it comes to educators and education? And then, Mark, make sure you get everybody in the thing. Okay, so there in my literature review, I did an analysis of the Thomas Gordon model. Okay, the Thomas Gordon model was in about, I would say, the mid-60s, was the start of the humanistic revolution when it came to positive psychology within education. And essentially, so to break down for you guys, what his model did is that it gave teachers a chance to communicate with students. Something that, in this day and age, seems very like day-to-day, very typical. But in that day and age, teachers were supposed to be point blank. Student comes to class, student does an assignment. With the TET model, teachers are given a chance to learn more about their students and be more with their students. Okay, so I felt like that was an appropriate. I felt like that was appropriate research to put within my thesis. Okay. Also within my literature review, I wanted to understand the difference between the differences in humanistic psychology and in humanistic psychology in the classroom. And mainly the difference that I wanted to understand was the difference between Abraham Maslow, who I previously talked about, but also Carl Rogers. Okay? Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow are known as the two fathers of humanistic psychology. Okay? Also, knowing that the TET model was created, I also wanted to understand the limitations of the TET model, because obviously I'm bringing this model up to you guys right now, and you guys don't know who I'm talking about. But why is that? Why is humanistic psychology something that is an afterthought when it comes to education? Why is building rapport with a student still, in some contexts, is considered an afterthought as well? So within that, I wanted to look into the limitations of the TET model. What I found is that the TET model was very, very, very strong throughout the early to late 70s. However, as we go into the 80s and we go into the Reagan era, the TET model could not compete with the change within the political climate. Within the Reagan era, Reagan was looking for something to be back to, as similar as we kind of have right now, is going back to old times, where kids just came to school, they just came to school to learn. They weren't there to build relationships and bonds with their teachers. They were there to simply just learn, follow directions, and that'd be the end of their day. Okay? The TET model was not able was not able to stay bright within those times, And one of the factors that I found is the reason why the TNT model couldn't is because the TNT model was only focusing on the initiated interaction between the teacher and the student, okay? And then what I found with that is that, the reason is that the creator of the TET model, which is Thomas Gordon, he based most of the TET model off of the theories of Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers focused mainly on the rapport building between two individuals, right? However, Abraham Maslow, if you compare that to Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that is only a small part of the hierarchy of needs, which would fall within love and belongingness. Maslow's hierarchy of needs focuses on a long-term span of development. So not one initial part. And you have Reagan, who's advertising and promoting that we need to have reality with these kids, we need to keep it practical, we need to get these kids ready for careers. But one of the reasons that I feel like the TET model could not suffice is because the TET model was only focusing on one part of an individual's academic career. If we were to change that trajectory and put it more so, we're focusing on the long-term development of the student and every element of the student, I feel like it'd be more successful. And I was able to find research, and Maslow agreed. Maslow agreed that when it comes to establishing rapport with an individual or a student, we don't need to just have the kid take accountability. We need to have the student be able to be invested. In order to be invested, the student has to understand not only what they did wrong, but how it will impact their future. In my opinion, one of the cons of the TET model based off of Carl Rogers is that it was only focusing on right now. Abraham Maslow wanted to focus on right now and the day after. And that, in my opinion, I feel like would have been a stronger defense against the Reagan era. Okay? So when I go into my methodology, I'll go very briefly in this, is that, and I'll pass it around to you guys. I created a model, okay, to analyze communication that is also based off of Abraham Maslow. If you want to look at it, just pass it around. Within the model, I have guidelines for administration, visual aids provided, forms to record responses, description sections for certain behaviors, and suggestions for reactive and proactive strategies. As I said, the model is based distinctly off of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, to go back to what I mentioned previously, the reason I feel like the hierarchy of needs would be a great avenue for understanding communication is just by looking at this photo, you can see how he had development be at a linear process, okay? Instead of just initiating rapport off of something spontaneous and something that you really can't predict or just something in that moment, now if we were able to align communication with Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we can be proactive, we can be predictable, okay? And then when we see kids communicating with us about having deficits in certain areas, that makes us more proactive because then we can game plan about those certain areas. This is something we already do. Our kids that we know that need OT, our kids that we know that come to school hungry, our kids that we know that are very hyper, our kids that we know that need a lot of like expectations and talking to before they go into certain social interactions. By aligning communication with Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is giving us a linear system in order to organize all that. So it's something that we already do, but by aligning it with Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're organizing it and keeping us consistent. Okay? Some of the parts of my model is the narrative form. This is the first part and the main part. The form is used to record a student's responses. Its structures are similar to the hierarchy of needs, okay? And this will be used to find deficits, setting events, slow triggers, and to develop reactive strategies. The next form is the description section, okay? This will be your guide in creating both reactive and proactive strategies. The form includes a description of the hierarchy level, its relation to the classroom, and possible reactive strategies. So basically with these two forms are the two main forms. Within those forms, they use the narrative form to find a deficit area within the hierarchy need that the child has. And then after you find that, okay, if you're not that knowledgeable in the hierarchy of needs, I provide the description section, okay, which gives you a basic description of the hierarchy level, its relation to the classroom, and it also gives you ideas for reactive strategies that you can use within the classroom within that student who has that deficit at that point in time. Now, for some of our younger students, but also our students who have trouble when it comes to communication, I also provided visual aids, okay? The goal of what the visual aids are for is to basically, hopefully, to help the child be able to communicate what deficits they have, and help you still be able to analyze that deficit and find what that trigger is. Okay, how to use the visual aids. My recommendation is that when it comes to the visual aids, you should present the caricature to the student with all 5 cards. So this is all 5 hierarchy areas. Then say, this child seems upset, using the example child, and what would you think would help them out with these 5 cards? Let the student pick a card, the student picks the card, then after the student picks the card, you refer to the narrative form and connect their choice to that specific hierarchy level. Then after that, ask the student the sample question that's provided in the narrative form, so hopefully this will trigger a response for the student, basically giving you a chance to isolate that deficit need, and then proceed to the description page for suggestions on possible reactive strategies. There you go. Okay, now, one thing I also noticed too, okay, and this is something that I created from just the experiences that we have all had here at the center, is that we have situations where we have kids that they get taken by OT, they get taken by speech, or even they go to the academy or they go to residential, and then they pop off, they explode. And that staff don't know how to deal with that behavior or communicate with that child, and instead of de-escalating the child, they re-escalate them, okay? I think we've all had scenarios where we've had a kid go to OT and go to speech, and then OT and speech are bringing them back within 5 minutes because they're saying he's acting up. And then you find out he's doing something simple, very simple, that can be easily cured, right? So I figured by creating a long-term form, which I call the intervention brainstorming form, this form will be used to develop proactive strategies. It is recommended to all classroom staff, that are involved in the process, and this will be helpful for additional staff or unfamiliar staff. I also made this for my academy staff when it comes to us getting new teachers. We've been in too many scenarios where we've had new teachers come in and they do not know how to deal with the classroom behaviors. And more importantly, they struggle or they're afraid to actually initiate and interact with those behaviors. So with a long-term form or intervention brainstorming form, okay, as a team, we come up with some basic reactive strategies that we know that will work with the child, okay, based off the deficit area that we are seeing continuously with the student. And then we develop, as you will see it in the example I'm passing out, we develop a step-by-step of how to implement the intervention for the child. And by that step-by-step, I say we play it out exactly by the ABCs. We play it out exactly what typical antecedents we see with the child, what behaviors we see with the child, and also what consequences we see with the child. Okay? And in my personal opinion, I feel like if we have something like that and we're using it effectively, I feel like that this is something that we can bring to IEPs. I feel like this is something we can bring to parent-teacher conferences. Okay, when you have that parent that's saying, I have no idea what behavior you're talking about, he's saying in the classroom, not only can we say that we have the data to support it, we can say that we broke it down play by play. And we can say that when he gets transferred from 5th grade to 6th grade, that you're worried about him eloping, but we have documents that we can just send his teacher to get his teacher ready over the summer. Okay? And I feel like, again, that's coming down to communication as a team that's lacking. Okay, I also in there provide guidelines. I'll talk very briefly about this. This section provides all the information that I presented today. In addition, it answers questions like what is appropriate action for a student that has multiple deficits, what can be done if a student has continuous deficits in certain hierarchy levels. So when it comes to my model, I implemented my model in the academy, and I did it for about a 6-week period. And what happened, now at first there was some complications because my sample size was originally supposed to be about 6 students, and for numerous reasons and variables, my sample size dropped down to initially 2 kids, okay? One kid didn't use the model that much, and the other kid used the model frequently. What was found though was very, very, very unique for several reasons. First, going off of just qualitative feedback and interviews and observations, I checked in with both parents, I checked in with both teachers, I checked in with both instructional aides, and they all told me that the reception, the child was very receptive towards the model. And they also felt very comfortable with the model. Some of the things that I was told by staff, and these are all seasoned staff too, that they told me is that they felt they loved how structured the model was, but they also loved how diverse the model was. They love that the model doesn't just look at one point of the child, it looks at all points of the child. They also enjoyed how informative the model was. And they also loved how the model was something that they could take, as I mentioned previously, from one staff to the next, to the next, to the next. Now my analysis of the quantitative data, now originally I was going to use a correlation coefficient to compare my target population to the rest of the individuals in the class. Obviously I had to drop within the sample size, so I decided that wouldn't be an appropriate analysis. So instead, I decided to go with the t-test, because the main thing I wanted to show is the significance within using effective communication when it comes to Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What I found within the t-test, and I don't really need to go into the statistics, but what I found in the t-test is that when it comes to the one individual that I did the test with, he showed an increase within his scores from the 6-week time that I had him using my model to the post-test, which was after he was using my model. So I compared his pre-test and I compared his post-test, and I found that there was increase, right? There was an increase because, as you can see right here, I mean, he was getting like, these are his averages for his behavior. I mean, 62s, 42s, 48s, 74s, and we've all done dailies before. That's low, right? After using my model, he was getting 100s, 91s, 80s, 93s, 75s. However, that's just numbers, okay? I have to do a t-test though to understand whether or not that is significant, okay? I did a t-test to see if that was significant, and I found it was. I found that my model, having communication be aligned effectively with Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, made a significant difference in his disruptive behavior within the classroom. I was pretty happy. To conclude it, okay, I want to talk about some key things, which is the significance of effective communication. I feel like, as I talked about previously, that it's a benefit for educators and staff. And then that's essentially the main reason I made this model, is that I really, from just parents, outside resources, or even some newer staff, I really wanted something to really back up what we said. I feel like when it comes to behaviors, I feel like when it comes to certain students, I feel like there's not a system in place to really help people understand what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I feel like creating this model where not only is communication being monitored on a regular basis and being used in a linear system as the hierarchy of needs, okay, I feel like there's a lot of day-to-day stuff that we deal with, which is like staff that's unaware of a certain behavior that we can avoid. And then by avoiding that, we can avoid other things, as in when you have classroom management, you have IAs that don't want to deal with the teacher because the teacher doesn't know what she's doing. Or the teacher who doesn't want to deal with the IAs because she doesn't feel like the IAs don't know what they're doing. This right here crushes all that. This gives us an opportunity to have a voice in the teacher too. And at the same time, everybody's on the same page, but most importantly, the student themselves are actually getting the recognition they need within the class when it comes to their deficits. And the most important thing, and hopefully, they're learning. Okay? And now, also when it comes to the significance of effective communication, as I touched on, the acknowledgement and the diversity. Each one of our students are different. And I feel like, I like restorative circles and I like zones of regulation and all that stuff, but I feel like with Abraham Maslow, I feel like we really can get to the nitty-gritty about how diverse our students are, and more importantly, how diverse they are when it comes to their individual growth. My last piece that I want to touch on within my conclusion is the future of communication. What I learned from both models is that effective communication can be possible. Okay, but what I also learned too is that establishing a consistent influence is going to be difficult. Okay, because at some point in time you do have troubles when it comes to diving deep within the individual, and that's time. Time is a very big factor. You know, and honestly, I should have touched on that briefly, but when I was going through my model, the one con that a lot of people were telling me is that even though I tried my best to take time in consideration as a variable, a lot of people said still it was very time consuming. Okay? And I think from all of our experiences, and even I felt the same way too as I was talking about the model, is it can, if you have a student where you're having trouble finding deficit, it can be very time consuming. So what I learned by looking at both models is that there's still, if we can find a way to take Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs and then even simplify it more, I think we'd be on the right road to find something a little bit more sufficient. Along with that, I feel like that was highlighted in here is a lot of internal factors that nobody talks about. We have burnt out teachers, but I don't think we ask why. We have overpopulated classrooms, and I don't think anybody questions that. And when it comes to effective communication, I think the reason why effective communication and humanistic psychology in general is looked at as an afterthought is because we are not questioning these things. Why do we have burnt out teachers? Okay? We have burnt out teachers, and we have burnt out teachers that yell at IAs. Why do we have them? We're not asking ourselves, why do we have classrooms where we have one teacher, clearly most of the kids have behaviors, and they're at max capacity or over? Why are we not asking these questions? Okay? But then at the same time, why are we asking the question, why aren't teachers communicating with the students? These are a couple of things that as I went through my thesis that I realized are something that we need to look at as an educational system. We're asking ourselves, why aren't the teachers communicating with the students? Why aren't the teachers communicating with the IAs? But at the same time, we're not asking ourselves, why are teachers getting burnt out? Why are IAs dreading going to work? And at the same time, why are we shoving a kid into a classroom that clearly has no seats? Okay? So as looking into the future, I feel like communication is definitely a resource that we need, but I feel like there's some internal factors that we also need to look at our individual as a system ourselves.